I'm at the largest Amazon conference in the world. No, it's not New York. It's not even San Francisco. The signs behind me are any indication it's in China. In this video, I'm going to tell you all about the tactics and strategies that Chinese sellers are using to get ahead, and I'll even tell you what Amazon themselves is doing to support Chinese sellers that they're not doing to support you as a non-Chinese seller. Stay tuned. So this Amazon conference took place from December 10th to December 11th for 2 days in Shanghai, China, like I mentioned. Now, this Amazon event is hosted by Amazon, so it's very similar to the Boost event that you may be familiar with in the US. Now, the big difference between this event and the Boost conference is the size of it. There were over 10,000 attendees from throughout China at this event, and it was hosted at the largest convention center in Shanghai. And Shanghai has some very, very big convention centers, so it was absolutely massive. It's definitely the biggest event that I've ever been to from an e-commerce perspective. So like every Amazon event, Amazon always seems to have one particular issue that they're pushing. And at this event, there was no mystery as to what they were pushing. They were pushing AGL. Now, what is AGL? AGL is Amazon Global Logistics. Now, if you're not familiar with Amazon Global Logistics, you might have heard me talking about it on the podcast or pumping it in Ecom Crew Premium. Amazon Global Logistics is a way that you as a seller can ship your fulfillment using one of Amazon's very own freight forwarders. So with AGL, basically what it allows you to do is a couple things. Number one, it allows you to have priority shipments into Amazon. So if you've ever sent something into Amazon and it takes weeks to get your stuff cleared into stock, this is not the case with AGL. It gets cleared into stock almost immediately. Now, to give you an example, we're shipping something right now from China, a 20-foot container, into the US, and it's going to take 18 days from the time that it leaves port to the time that it actually gets checked in and received into inventory at Amazon. And it's a very granular tracking process too. We can see every step of the way where the shipment is. It's been loaded at the container. It's been shipped onto the ocean. It's been unloaded. It's very granular and a nice kind of change of pace from your typical freight forwarder where it's basically a black box once the shipment gets loaded. Now, AGL is actually available to any seller in the world. And in Ecom Crew Premium, we teach you how you can get an account for AGL and start shipping with Amazon. For foreign sellers, it's a little bit more tricky because most of the documentation and things that Amazon are requesting from you are in Chinese. Now, you can get it translated, but for the most part, if you don't have an English contact at the AGL team, it can be a little bit tricky. So there's a plug for Ecom Crew Premium. Check out ecomcrew.com/premium. Will help you get enrolled in AGL. Now, Amazon had a little trade hall going on along with the conference. So the trade hall had various software and service providers presenting their goods at the trade hall. Now, the terrible thing is that Amazon AGL was the center of the trade hall. You couldn't walk 2 feet without being hounded by an AGL rep from Amazon. Now, of all the trade hall vendors there, though, about 10% were software providers, 10% were VAT and other services, and about the other 80% were freight forwarders. So Amazon and freight forwarders have existed in a symbiotic relationship for many, many years. And then all of a sudden, overnight, Amazon takes the money from these freight forwarders to let them exhibit at their trade hall and then proceeds to compete directly with them. Does that sound familiar to anyone? Now, the conference was divided into a couple groups. They had the main conference where they had 10,000 people gathered into one hall, basically a rah-rah event with all the different VPs of China presenting. And then they had master classes where people from Amazon taught various aspects about Amazon. So the Amazon master classes were not that interesting as you would expect. They were teaching all the sellers above the belt techniques, things like how to use bullet points to sell benefits and not features, and other pretty tame things. They weren't teaching you how to get reviews through ManyChat, seek, find, buy campaigns, or those type of gray hat techniques. The actual conference was hosted by various VPs of Amazon who had flown in basically for one night for that event. And these VPs, most of them did not speak Chinese, so surprisingly, the event was almost all in English dubbed into Chinese. They gave out nice little headsets to everybody that could translate either from English to Chinese or Chinese to English. Okay, now let's talk about the good stuff. Let's forget about what Amazon's preaching. We know that's kind of garbage. And let's talk about what these Chinese sellers are actually doing. Now, I was lucky enough that I actually got a ticket to a VIP networking event hosted by an Amazon software tools company. So this Amazon software tool was basically more or less kind of like Jungle Scout or Helium 10, but it was in Chinese. So the software package was called Seller Motor, and that was actually a pretty big takeaway from me. So Seller Motor was basically similar to Jungle Scout or Helium 10 or one of the other software packages that you're probably using already. Now, Seller Motor did do a couple interesting things. The most interesting thing is that you can click on an ASIN and they'll determine the origin of that seller. And how do they do that? They look at the brand registry name. They look up that name in a public database and determine their country of origin that way. And it was really interesting and it was incredibly accurate. We had 3 or 4 friends all test this tool on their brands, and it accurately figured out that, hey, I'm Canadian, and my good friend from Indiana is American. So it had a really high success ratio. Now, the big question is this interesting or useful? I probably put it in the interesting category, not necessarily useful. So the biggest thing these Chinese sellers are doing, of course, is with review manipulation. And it's in a couple ways. Either have different review groups or they're getting basically burner accounts and they're buying fake products. And there's a lot of services in China that will help you get reviews. Surprise, surprise. What was more interesting, though, from a wider perspective, is where all these Chinese sellers are coming from. Now, my original thought process was that, hey, it's all these entrepreneurs in China that all of a sudden heard in the last couple of years that Amazon is this great gold mine and it's a way to get rich quick. That's not the case, actually. Where most of the sellers are coming from is Taobao. Now, Taobao, if you're not familiar, is the giant e-commerce player in China. It even dwarfs Amazon from a gross merchandise volume perspective. They have a ton of customers and it's even more dominant in China than Amazon is in the US. So talking with a lot of these sellers who are retired Taobao sellers, they were complaining that Taobao is basically too competitive now. When they first started, there were not a lot of competitors, and now even the most basic benign product has dozens or hundreds of products on Taobao. And what's happened is that margins on Taobao have been pushed down and down and down. Again, does this sound familiar? So all these Chinese sellers are going from this market, Taobao, where they think that margins are too low and competition is too high, and they're going to this great pie in the sky, Amazon, where they feel like all of the opportunity is on Amazon. The margins, believe it or not, they think are way higher than Taobao, and the competition, again, believe it or not, is lower than on Taobao. Now, yes, the Chinese former Taobao sellers are good at manipulating reviews because manipulating reviews is an important part of Taobao, just like Amazon, but they're also just better a lot of times from a marketing perspective. So to succeed on Taobao, you have to often include lots of little freebies in your items, and it's expected that you're going to respond to all customer service inquiries pretty much the next minute after you receive them. So just from an overall customer experience standpoint, Taobao sellers are pretty good. It's easy to throw all these Chinese sellers under the bus and say, hey, they're just using these black hat tactics to get ahead. The truth of it is, some of them are actually just pretty good at what they do. Speaking with a lot of sellers, one of the other big advantages they have is just the ease of warehousing and logistics. So of the group that I was traveling with, I had a few friends, a couple of them Chinese. Both of them have warehouses in China, and they're paying about 13 RMB per hour for a warehouse employee. Now that's about $1.75, $1.80 US per hour for a warehouse employee. And these warehouse employees obviously help with logistics. They also help with kitting, bundling items, handling returns, all those types of things. So that's a huge advantage they have over the US, where if you're in a major area like Vancouver or Seattle, you can be paying $15 plus per hour for a warehouse employee. So overall, my biggest takeaway was just the sheer magnitude of the number of Chinese sellers on Amazon. Now, I've heard numbers being thrown around 10 to 20% of all sellers on Amazon are Chinese, and I thought that number always seemed a little bit high. Now, after this conference, I feel like it's a little bit lower. To give you some examples, this was the largest Amazon conference ever held in China. So the number of Chinese sellers predictably is growing more and more each year, and it's not going to slow down anytime soon. Well, I hope you guys enjoyed that video. If you did, leave a comment in the section below. Thanks for watching.